got a comment asking if I can explain what emotional sexual abuse is, and yes, I would be happy to. That is a lot of what I do on this account. So if you end up relating to any of this, please follow me because this is part of the community I'm trying to build here. In a nutshell, kind of the way that it is transferred to you is emotional or psychological, but the type of abuse is sexual. So this type of abuse can cause sexual trauma despite being conveyed through an emotional or psychological method. A lot of us kind of grow up thinking of sexual abuse as being limited to molestation and rape, but there are lots of non-physical types of sexual abuse that my experience was primarily in childhood, so that's what a lot of what I focus on here, but I have examples from both. I'm going to cover the children examples first. And so these are any kid under 18, not just preteens. Making sexual jokes or sexual compliments to children, what you might think of as sexual harassment if it were to happen in a workplace, but talking to a child that way. Inappropriate discussion of the child's body or of puberty. Now, of course, I'm not saying that those topics can't be discussed, but there is like an educational and informational way that those things can be discussed with children, and then there is an inappropriate way that is like the adult is getting something out of it. Some adults share their own sexual stories with children or their romantic problems with children. Adults can use children for their own romantic or sexual needs. So, for example, things like, tell me that I'm beautiful, tell me that I'm pretty, tell me I'm sexy, do you think I look hot? Teaching children that they are responsible for the behavior of adults. For example, telling a 12-year-old that if she were to wear a two-piece to the beach, that men would treat her inappropriately. Or things like a man gets caught gawking at a child in a sexualized way. The child acts disgusted. The man says, what do you expect if you're dressed like that? When adults are invasive or inappropriate when asking children about their dating life, their intimate life, their self-pleasure, their puberty, need to have some conversations with your kids so that they are educated and informed. There is a distinct difference between, say, educating your child who might be a teenager and might be starting to date on how to stay safe, give them the information that they need to know, versus trying to get details out of them for some sort of like voyeuristic reason, or even not necessarily a creepy reason, but just not respecting their age-appropriate level of autonomy and agency that is needed, privacy that is needed. Causing emotional harm to children's sexual development by shaming their natural puberty or sexual development, or making it like an overly moralized thing. People who are raised in purity culture often end up with this type of sexual damage. Sometimes emotional sexual abuse can be somewhat physical. An example of that would be forcing a child to sleep in the adult's bed when the child does not want to, or things like forcing a child to cuddle, or forcing a child to like stroke their parent's face, or forcing them to let you pet their hair. It doesn't have to be overtly sexual physical things, parts of the body that are typically sexual, for physical stuff to be inappropriate and boundary crossing and sexual in nature. Another aspect is sexual environmental exposure. Things like if a child is in the room with mom and dad have sex, so they are therefore exposed to things that they should not be exposed to. A child has a parent that is a sex worker, if they are overly exposed to their parent's profession. Encouraging or even forcing a child to dress in sexualized clothing, say sexualized things, dance in sexualized ways. Kind of flirting with a child or complimenting them as if they are your partner. That's an example of what might be said there would be something like, you are growing up to be such a heartbreaker. I'm gonna have to lock you away so that nobody else can have you. Or if I was 15 again and not your dad, I would be the first in line to be asking you out. Emotional incest or treating a child like a surrogate partner can be part of this. Some people who experience emotional incest really don't like framing it as sexual abuse, and I respect that, but a lot of people do, and that's valid too. And sometimes emotional incest or being a surrogate spouse can be not overtly sexual, but can be things like treating a child like your own personal little therapist, so they are overexposed to the emotional life of the parent and feel responsible, kind of extreme parentification. And sometimes that can be really making the child feel very responsible for their parent's mental health, saying things like, "You're really the only one who listens to me," or "You're the only one I need," or "You're the only one who's ever here for me." That type of extreme emotional dependence on a child can have a flavor of like emotional intimacy to it, even if it is not sexualized, that can still cause sexual damage to a child because it is so smothering and it teaches them such unhealthy boundaries of what familial relationships should be versus what romantic relationships should be. Gaslighting children on their healthy responses to inappropriate behavior can be emotional sexual abuse. So something like a child says that they think Uncle Jim is creepy because he always wants her to sit on his lap. If another adult says something like, "But Uncle Jim loves you, you're reading way too much into this," there's nothing wrong with that. That is gaslighting, and that is emotional sexual abuse. Adult examples. Anything for adult would be non-consensual, of course. These would be things like verbally demeaning somebody in sexualized ways, coercion, threats or manipulation for sex, shaming somebody's boundaries or limits, sexual humiliation or degradation, sexual threats, force or coercion, which could be things like giving the silent treatment until or unless somebody receives sex. "I will only pay our rent this month if you're sleeping with me at least 3 days a week." Sexual gaslighting, things like you actually wanted it, or you're exaggerating, or you owe me. Forcing unwanted sexual conversations, sexual harassment, and sharing sexual stories or videos without consent.